Hey everyone, my name is Yuka Beth, and this is God is Everything podcast. So today's title is called Stop Asking God How. Stop asking God how He's going to do it. This is actually based on Psalms chapter 59, verse 9. I was reading it the other day, and it really just got me thinking about how David viewed God. David is saying, "Oh, my strength, I watch for you. You, O God, are my fortress, my loving God. All my strength, I watch for you. You, O God, are my fortress, my loving God." And when you look at the life of David, David experienced a lot of victories. He won a lot of wars. He had a successful life. The plans that God had for him, he fulfilled. And when you look at the force, the strength, the power, the authority, the confidence behind his life, behind his victories, it was from God. And so in this verse, David is acknowledging his strength. He's saying, God, you are my strength. And I think this is so critical in our Christian journey because God has given me and you the responsibility to be faithful and the responsibility to be obedient. That is our job. That's our only job. And his responsibility, God's responsibility, is to be our strength, to be the strength behind every plan we have, to be the strength behind every operation. And it gets to a point where we wander over to the department that God is in charge of and we rely on our strength. We start to rely on what we can do. But when you think of the parable of the mustard seed, Jesus basically says, hey, if you have enough faith of a mustard and you tell a mountain to move, it's going to move. So in order for the mountain to move, you have to speak to it. And in order to speak to it, you have to have enough faith, right? Faith of a mustard seed. Faith yields obedience. You cannot separate the two. That's our job. That's what the parable tells us to do, that we are supposed to have faith, which will result in obedience. But the power behind the mountain moving over, the strength behind the mountain moving over, doesn't come from us. It comes from God. God is the one who moves the mountain. God is the one who can do the impossible things in your life. God is the one who can perform miracles. That's not our job. We don't not have the responsibility of producing the results. Our job is to have what? Enough faith, which will yield enough obedience, and then the mountain will move over. The problem is a lot of us, we speak to the mountain and then we walk over to the mountain and we try to push it with our strength. That is impossible. We are literally trying to do impossible things that will never work. That's why it feels like you're going in circles. That's why it feels like whatever you do, it's just nothing works because you are relying on your strength. You are trying to push a mountain that God told you to speak to, that God told you to have enough faith to speak to. But you have skipped your responsibility, you're overlapping, and now you're trying to push this mountain in your life. Maybe it's financial, maybe it's health, whatever it is. But that's God's job. And because David understood that God was the strength behind everything he did, he realized all he had to do was just rely on God. Like God is doing most of the hard work. When you really think about it, God is the one who's actually pushing the mountain for us. God is the one who is literally splitting the Red Sea for us. He's the one leading us in the wilderness. He's doing the big things. He's carrying the heavy burdens. All we have to do is have faith and be obedient. Stop asking God how. The more you keep asking God how, the more you're wandering over to his territory. The more you're contaminating his territory of impossibilities, his territories of miracles with your human reasoning, with your logic, with your questions. And that's why when you look at your life, it makes sense. That's why when you look at your life, there's like little to no miracles because you've always done things that made sense. You've always dictated your life with reasoning and logic. There's no room for miracles when logic is literally what your foundation is. David is saying, God, you are my strength. You are the reason for the miracles that happen in my life. You are the reason that I'm winning. It's not me. And if you don't understand that as a Christian, you are going to be exhausted because you're going to spend your whole life trying to push mountains in your life that you have no ability to push. When you realize you can't control this situation in your life, when you realize you don't have control over this and that, you tend to hold tight to things you think you have control over, fighting for that control. And that's going to wear you out. You're going to be tired when God is literally telling you, stop, let it go, let me figure it out. The more you spend time with God, the more you hear His word. The more you hear His word, the more your faith increases. The more your faith increases, the more obedience you have. And that's where your job stops. And everything else that happens is God. And honestly, I feel like this year, the moment I stopped asking God how He's going to do things, the moment I stopped asking Him questions, I saw so many miracles. I've experienced so many things that do not make sense. And I feel like when I'm ready to share like my full testimony, it's just crazy. Like this year, the moment I stopped being logical, the moment I stopped trying to take control, and I sat back and I said, you know what, God, I don't know how you're going to do it, but I know you will. You have already given me the word. You've already given me revelation. So that's your department. I'm going to make sure I have enough faith. And there are times where the devil will attack your faith. He like the devil doesn't have to attack your strength because he knows God is your strength. He just has to attack your confidence. He has to attack your beliefs. And once he got you there, then that's it. And sometimes he will feed you ego. He'll feed you thoughts that will make you feel like it's because of, how smart you are. It's because of who you know. It's because of your work. But the Bible says it's not by power, no by might, but by my spirit, but by God's spirit that you are here, that you will succeed. And the moment you realize that, especially if you're a young person, the moment you realize that early on, your life will be filled with miracles. Like, and that's one thing. I never want to wake up and look at my life and be like, you know what? My life is so predictable. I never want a life like that. Every day I want to wake up and reflect about my life and be like, whoa, I don't even know how that happened. That was a miracle. That was another miracle. I want my life to be filled with miracles, and so should you. When you look at the lady with the 12 years of blood, that story is so powerful to me because when she's in the crowd, a lot of times when we read the story, we just assume like, she walked through the crowd and she touched the hem of Jesus, and it was a great, great, great story. But we don't actually realize that she had to go through a lot of mental warfare. Mind you, you're in the crowd. You don't know how you're gonna be healed. Like if she was logical, if she would have just sat there and reasoned everything out, her doubts would have caused her to just go home. The fact that she had to go through the crowd, just imagine the things the devil was taunting to her, the things that he was yelling to her, the way he was probably yelling insecurities to her, doubt, making her feel less than, condemning her. But she kept going through those thoughts, kept going through every and when you look at crowds, there's levels to crowds. When you are in a big crowd, when you're coming in, it gets harder because it's tight. As you're trying to get to the front, it's hard. You gotta fight. And then you're overhearing people talking smack about you. You seeing people the way people are looking at you. She has to go through that so that she could touch the hem of Jesus, not knowing how he was going to heal her, but having enough faith to touch his hem. And that's the life that me and you need. That's the life you should be living. Stop asking God how, because every time you keep asking God how, you are robbing yourself of the miracles that he can perform in your life. Every time you're trying to reason everything, you are lessening the impossibilities that he is willing to do. You don't got to worry about how. Even when you look at the miracles Jesus did, it doesn't really tell us exactly how he did it. It just says it happened. And so I don't know who needs to hear this. Maybe there's a mountain in your life that is impossible for you to move. Maybe there's a couple mountains in your life and you have been wasting time trying to push these mountains with your strength, relying on what you know, relying on how much you have. You need to allow God to do his job. Your job is to have faith and to have obedience. and allow God to push those mountains out of your life. Stop asking him how he's going to do it. If God says this mountain will be thrown into the sea, believe it. If God is looking at your life and he's saying, stop worrying, I got you, then stop worrying. Stop trying to figure things out. That's not your job. That's not your job. That's not your job. Stop entertaining the logic in everything because that's where the devil will meet you. And one thing about the devil, he's crafty. He's more logical than you are. That's a war you won't win. Trust God. It will happen. And I'm telling you, this year, the moment I started doing that, the more peaceful I've become, the more less controlling I've become. I feel like I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I can have tendencies to control because if it makes you feel powerful, it makes you feel like you're actually in charge, but we're not in charge. So it's my prayer that as we progress through this week, through this year, through this month, that we allow God to do what he alone can do. He alone. Stop asking him how he's going to do it. This concludes this episode of God is Everything podcast.